Hey guys, Ratha here. So last year I played Titan Quest for the first time ever, and as an ARPG fan, I always overlooked this one, thinking that couldn't possibly impress me after playing through Diablo 2, Grim Dawn, and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I sure was wrong though, because it became one of my favorite story-based ARPG games. Titan Quest 2 released recently, and I immediately jumped on the opportunity to play it as soon as it released into early access. Normally, I would never play on hardcore solo self-found for my first time playing a game, but this time I wanted to challenge myself, and I had a blast doing it. As you can see, I did lose my first character, Stormblade, to probably the most difficult boss in the game, Pan. After that, I just had to make a new character, but don't be fooled by the class name. It's more like a tanky warrior than a mage. I wanted to make a video showcasing this build because I breezed through the currently available content on hardcore with it, and I had zero close calls with dying. So if you're struggling to get through hardcore or just want to see a tank magic slash melee hybrid build, you've come to the right place. Let's load in. Oh, there's the message that we cleared all the content in case you were doubting. There you go. It's worth mentioning that just because I've cleared the content doesn't mean that there's nothing left to do. We actually grab these things in our repository, these remnants. You can bring them up to this altar here, this ritual shrine, and you can actually fight the bosses again. So if you are like thinking that, oh, there's nothing left to do in the game, apparently the level cap is 40, so you'll usually finish the campaign around 20. So you still have another 20 levels of stuff to do. You just go around exploring maps, trying to do all your world quests and everything, and then also do these remnants. But now, let's get into the build. So you'll notice that, unlike a mage, we're using a giant two-handed axe, and we're in like nearly full like tanky gear, ornate armor, and heavy armor are what I found to be the best for my build. And we're utilizing a few things here. So firstly, we're mostly specking into vigor and might for our stats for our main attributes. For our masteries, I started with earth and then I went into warfare. Now, warfare is not as necessary. I kind of just wanted warfare for some of the passive skills. I'm not really using a lot of the active skills for it. But Earth I thought sounded really interesting, especially when considering that the new way you can build these skills with modifiers. Every time you like upgrade them and hit these certain thresholds, unlocked at level 3, 5, 7, 9, etc., you get to choose one of these modifiers. And based on how many of these little indicators you have, tells you how much you can use these. So if I wanted to use Vortex on this skill, I would need 2 of these per upgrade. And you can upgrade that 3 times, right? So you get 3 of these modifiers if you get 6 of these. But for this build, we ended up going with Fissure. Fissure normally is a spell, but if we take this node here, this modifier, for one of these nodes, you can turn it into a slam attack, kind of similar to like a slam from Path of Exile. In fact, Fissure itself is very similar to Sunder from Path of Exile that shoots out 3 branching attacks or 3 branching like paths. Uh, Normally it starts with only 1, but you can upgrade it in this menu here and get, let's see, additional fissures here. So this costs 2 per. So I upgraded it to max. So each of these upgrades will give you +1 to the fissures, so 2 and then 3. You could also go with Overwhelm down here. Consuming full Overwhelm will add 2 more fissures to the cone, so we could do 5 fissures if we got that. Or you could even just do one of these and then grab this. You do need additional fissures in order to go into Overwhelm though. But alongside additional fissures, we also go with Interrupt because it deals 150% more damage against channeling enemies and stuns them for 1 second. Also refunds 60% of the energy spent, letting you spam more abilities. And then Shockwave just for dealing more damage to stun enemies. Since we are going to be stunning, if we just hit them again, we do a bunch of damage. Now, the reason why we want that interrupt thing is because you'll notice a lot of enemies in this game will do a channeling ability. Now, in case you don't know what that is, there will be an icon that comes up above the enemy's head. It'll look like a little spiral icon or like a circle. If you see that, that means they're channeling something. If you hit them during that with this ability, then you'll do a fuck ton more damage. It's like ridiculously a ridiculous amount of damage. Like, so let's see. I'm doing like 1400 average damage with this thing. It'll do like 3 times as much. It's insane. So those stacking more multipliers are definitely what you want to be looking out for. Deals 150% more damage, right? That is how you get some crazy damage in this game. Besides Fissure, we also wanted to go into something to generate Overwhelm. Now, Overwhelm is a mechanic used for Fissure. It consumes full Overwhelm for 50% more damage. So we get the 50% more on top of the 150% more against channeling enemies, dealing even more damage when we have full Overwhelm. We can generate Overwhelm with our basic melee attacks. You'll see down here, this icon. Overwhelm goes up to 3 stacks. You don't have to actually hit any enemies in order to generate Overwhelm with your melee attacks, just your basic attacks here. But Earthquake actually generates Overwhelm as well. It's not a skill that I feel like a lot of people will enjoy just because of this. Kind of have to stand still while channeling it. But you'll notice when we get rid of Overwhelm here, it generates 1 Overwhelm per stage, getting up to 3 pretty easily, then letting us slam again. So we do like big AoE and then slam immediately for some crazy damage. It's a really nice AoE ability, and it does like how much damage? 120% more damage per stage, and we go up to 2 more stages, so it goes higher and higher each time until we get to our 3rd. Now, the modifiers I decided to go with for Earthquake were just to give us more, get us Overwhelm faster. So we got fast channeling, which gives us more action speed, but also higher cost and cost per second. But then also we get extended charge, so we can go up +1 stage. So normally it goes up to 2, now we go up to 3, so we can get full Overwhelm stacks. Which then just lets us immediately use Fissure right afterwards. Now, obviously, standing still in ARPGs is never a good idea. But that's why we kind of built our character around the idea of being able to stand still while casting. Now, Earthquake is a spell, not an attack, so it'll scale differently than our weapon attacks, like Fissure. But in this game, it seems a lot easier to do hybrid builds like this, because you don't have to like invest as much into like spell damage and attack damage and stuff like that. It's kind of like inherent into your masteries, it feels like. Plus, Earthquake is more just for the Overwhelm stacks anyways for Fissure, because Fissure's our main damaging ability. However, it does do quite a bit of damage still when we get the full charges off. So another thing that you'll see me doing is I'll be using Barrier in order to use Earthquake. My main combo basically is to just do Barrier to gain a shield, and then hold Earthquake, do a giant AoE around me. You'll see that we have this massive bar going over our health bar, letting us absorb a bunch of damage. Now, when I'm casting Earthquake with Barrier active, it's very rare that enemies will get me out of Barrier before I run out and before I can cast Earthquake completely. Usually we'll be able to get Earthquake off to 3 charges easily without losing Barrier. So that is one way we are able to stand still without having to worry too much. I'm also using Earth Enchantment. This isn't like super necessary. I was just testing it out. I want to upgrade this more, but I'm using it just for additional armor because we are standing still. It seems to be working pretty well just with this alone. You could probably do something else. And then finally, our last skill is Ring of Flame. This was something I was kind of more messing around with since we are using a lot of energy with this build. This ability is kind of like Righteous Fire from Path of Exile, except normally you'd have to like cast it a bunch to keep it up. However, if you grab the permanency modifier, it turns the skill into a sustained skill that reserves energy, has no cooldown, and has no bonuses on use though. However, the base like skill itself is pretty interesting. It deals 12 fire damage every 0.5 seconds in a 2-meter radius around you, and it deals 20% more damage and has 5% increased radius per amplify. You gain amplify for every 18 energy spent, and with all the buffs that I have, it stacks up to 32 stacks. Normally it stacks to 20. But we're grabbing things like Blazing Heat to deal more damage to enemies closer to the center of it. We're grabbing Enhanced Amplify, which adds more and Amplify stacks, up to 12 here. It actually goes up to 2 more higher, but we're only taking 3 of it because I wanted Weakening Heat as well. Enemies inside the aura get a negative to cold, fire, res, and armor value every second, up to minus 24% when they're inside our aura, which will basically just help us one-shot things a lot easier with Fissure and whatnot. But here's what that looks like. This is Earth Enchantment. You get like a cool little fire aura. Then we use Ring of Flame here. This cool AoE. You'll notice whenever we are using Barrier, Earthquake into Fissure, we generate a lot of stacks of Amplify. You'll just see that ring increasing more and more. And then if we're spamming Fissure as well, we get a bunch. And it goes up really high to like 16. That's why I didn't want to go all the way into the Amplify stacks, because we're not always going to be at maximum stacks. We kind of generate around 20 stacks if I'm playing really well and whatnot and hitting a lot. But it's rare that we'll ever go over 30. But I just wanted to have an excuse to use more energy, basically. And we get more powerful the more energy we use. I would like to invest more into this skill, because I think it's really interesting. I'm sure having like an actual build around that would be really fun. And then lastly, let's look at Warfare. Warfare, I'm basically just using Leap as my only active skill, just for maneuverability. Because there's a lot of mechanics in this game that you'll want to be like avoiding. Fortunately, Leap is on like a long cooldown, but it does go pretty far. One thing that I wish they would change with Leap is that it doesn't seem to go over terrain obstacles. Like I can't go over cliffs and stuff, like in Path of Exile you can. Hopefully they add that maneuverability later in the game, because I'd like to be able to like jump over ledges and climb like cliffs and stuff. Give it more of a reason to like use movement skills like this. But as for our passive skills, let's look at those. With Earth, we just went into energy because we're using a lot of energy. Now, I do highly recommend using a mastery like Earth or Storm, because they have access to this thing called Ether Shield. While above 50% energy, 10% of damage taken is absorbed by energy. This is kind of like Mind Over Matter from Path of Exile, but on like a lower end scale. This is like super useful for survivability in hardcore. I highly recommend taking this. You can get this on Earth's passive, but you can also get one for Storm's passive. They do the same thing, I believe. I recommend taking this. Then we also went Earth Barrier for increased barrier and increased armor. And then we also get some barrier decay threshold and barrier decay rate reduced. So you'll notice whenever we pop barrier, we get this bar, and then it takes a while before it starts reducing. That's because of the reduced rate that we have, right? If you didn't grab that, it would go down a lot faster. So we want to kind of build around this, being able to use it on cooldown in order to help us just stand still and cast things. And we basically just always want to have this up in case of an emergency. And it's almost up as often as we can use it. Almost. But because of how much we rely on being tanky with this build, I also just went into a bunch of health and armor. And what helped that is the Warfare masteries. So Battle Hardened here, which just gives percent increased health, base increased health, and increased armor percentage. Then we also have Earth has one as well, percent increased health, percent increased armor value, and fire res. I'll get back to fire res in a second. And then of course Combustion, because we are using Ring of Flame. This kind of ties into Ring of Flame to help with clear. When you kill a burning enemy, you have a 25% chance of causing an explosion, dealing fire damage in a radius. So this is kind of like a on-death explosion thing that you see in Path of Exile. I thought this sounded pretty interesting. I don't know if I really noticed it going off, so you don't necessarily need to invest in this, but the increased fire damage is useful for Ring of Flame. I think this is better if you're going more into the other fire spells like Flame Volley or Ignite or something, but pretty interesting skill. And then finally for Warfare, we're also grabbing Weapon Proficiency, So we get increased damage and attack speed for a Fissure, letting us just spam this a lot faster. It's not super slow anymore. It also does a lot more damage. And then finally, Invoker of War unlocks Spell Rage. I didn't really get to mess around with Spell Rage yet because we don't have anything that generates rage, but once I level this character up more, I'm going to be trying to invest in some of these other things to help me generate rage so we can start having our Earthquake to like benefit from rage and stuff. It should be pretty fun. I can't wait to build this character even more now. But that's it for the passives and the skills for this build. Now looking at the gear, this is kind of like, I was just kind of like winging it. I was just going with what I had. We got this really nice upgrade here. It does a bunch of damage. Unfortunately, I can't use the boots if I use them because I need a certain amount of agility that this axe is giving me. So I need to upgrade my boots, but this will be the actual weapon that we're going to use. I got this from the final boss of the campaign. It's really, really powerful. You can see our damage goes to like 101. It's really strong. I can't wait to mess around with this, but basically we're just using two-handed weapons, axes, clubs, whatever you can get your hands on. This thing is what we use to finish the final boss though. It's having like percent weapon damage, crit chance, anything like that. Obviously I'd prefer like fire damage, so this would be even better. Using this set, I think this is set item. I don't actually understand what the green rarity is yet because I haven't seen like any like full sets, but I'm assuming it's a set item. I've also found a few epic items that I'm not currently using, but they're like the purple rarity stuff. But yeah, mostly just heavy armor for glancing projectiles. Glancing is kind of like a mechanic similar to like block or something, where it has like a percent trigger on melee or projectile hit, and then that reduces the damage by a set amount, which I think you can change, make it higher or lower depending on like upgrades on your passive tree. But by default, it seems like you take half damage whenever it triggers. So glancing seems really powerful. Now, we did take a bunch of fire res for this build. And the reason why we want fire res, we actually go over cap with our skills here. The reason why we want to use this node is specifically for the boss Pan, because I feel like Pan is the strongest boss in the game. It does a lot of fire damage. And the way my first character died as a Stormblade was I teleported into Pan, assuming that he was doing a giant AoE attack. But what he was actually doing was firing a spiral volley of flame projectiles. And I teleported right into them and died instantly because I didn't have any fire resistance. The game definitely wants you to invest into resistances. So definitely take this if you are using Earth. It'll help a lot with capping fire resistance, and you get the +3 maximum from the feat here, which helps a lot more with tanking his hits. Now, obviously, you can't just stand there and like tank everything. You do need to move a little bit, but I found when I was fighting Pan, it was actually pretty easy to survive. It was very forgiving when you have enough fire resistance and enough health. We have like 1500 health to work with. That helped a lot. And then, yeah, the gear isn't too important. Just get things with high armor, resistances, added health always is a good thing. You'll see we have like a lot of 83 health, 89 health, stuff like that. And then we'll also get vigor, which is like your base attribute for health gain. I also got a nice helmet here that gives minus bonus to energy reserved. So like normally we'd be reserving like what 60 for this or something. Then we do minus 24 for it. It's really nice. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole build. If you are planning on doing hardcore solo self-found, I highly recommend trying a build like this. You don't have to use Earthquake, you could use whatever else you want, but I do enjoy the hybrid spell attack combo that we got going on here. It's pretty useful. Really good for slaying like large amounts of enemies. Good luck out there on Titan Quest 2. I will be playing a mage next probably because it's the only thing I haven't played. We tried a rogue range build. Now we tried a pure melee caster build. Now I want to try like a pure caster. So I'll let you guys know how that goes. And I'll be taking on some of these remnant bosses very, very soon. I'll see you guys in the next one later.